Thank you very much. And what a great pleasure to be with everybody and also to follow the very brilliant words of President Constantinescu. I think what you have said, Mr. President, really is wonderful. I want a copy of the text, and I want to follow up with you on a number of specifics also, because you really have put the spotlight on exactly the right themes. We are in a very deep crisis, to use the expression of the president. On the one side, I think economically we are likely to have a global depression covering much of the world, not all of the world, but a very, very serious and prolonged economic and social crisis with high unemployment and a lot of disarray. We are also at a geopolitical moment that is both dangerous, but also could be a constructive change if we're lucky. If we're not lucky, it will become even more dangerous. President just emphasized 2 dates, actually 3, and I will pick up on that just in starting remarks, because I think the United States has a tremendous culpability in this crisis, and what we are observing also is a reflection of the end of the U.S. responsible role in the world for the moment, and this has to be understood. I would mention 3 dates. One is 1991, the second is 2001, and the third is 2008, and now we have 2020. So let me mention those 4 dates. Our problems, I think, actually, in a way, trace back to 1991. The Soviet Union ended. Mr. Gorbachev had made a concept of a new era of peace and cooperation, but the United States viewed it as the era of U.S. hegemony and U.S. unipolarity, which is a ridiculous idea in a world where the U.S. is 4% of the world population, and there are 96% of the rest of the world, which does not want one power dominating the world. In 2001, when 9/11 occurred, the U.S. launched a global war, which was absolutely crazy. It was a misdiagnosis of the situation. It took a terrorist attack and made it into a geopolitical crisis. The U.S. opened war throughout the Middle East, all of which went very badly. In 2008, the U.S. created the global financial crisis, which originated on Wall Street through mismanagement and greed. Now we are faced in the United States with the worst political leadership we've had in our history, at least since the Civil War, which was 1860. President Trump is an incompetent. He's a narcissist. He is actually, technically speaking, a psychopath. And this is not a good situation for the world. So we are in a Great Depression in the United States already. Unemployment is over 20%, not yet the headline, but it will be the headline soon. And we have no strategy, no recovery, just division. Because Trump wants to use his demagoguery to sustain his power despite his grotesque incompetence. We have 85,000 dead in the United States. But it's interesting, 40% of Republicans say that Trump is anointed by God to lead. So there is a certain Weberian charisma, if I could use that word, but actually a certain cult aspect to this that is very, very dangerous. Trump himself has messianic delusions. He is a mentally ill man, but he has a following that is rather strong in the country as well. So all of this means we are, in my opinion, in a geopolitical crisis, as well as a disease epidemic, as well as an economic crisis. And the idea of Trump and his cronies is to try to create a new Cold War with China in this period. And this is the active engagement almost every day that this is the China virus, that this is China's fault, that this is China's cover-up. So we're not only in a crisis, but we are in a, and not only in a crisis of lack of leadership, but a crisis of deliberate division and attempting to turn the health disaster into a political gambit of the United States through a renewed attack on China. Why China? For the simple reason that China is the proof against US unipolarity. China is a large civilizational power that is an affront to the United States' claim to superiority of world culture and politics. And so the United States mentality among our elites cannot accept that. And so this is why it's so easy to drive the terror and the fear against China. And that's what Trump is trying to do also as a political lever. So this is why I think the president's remarks are so important. We're not merely facing a technical question of how to control an epidemic, though that's what's needed to save a lot of lives. This is a very dangerous virus. It will spread around the world unless it is contained by very strong public health capacity. This is a public health crisis, first and foremost. And if you don't have good governance, people will die in large numbers. That's why the United States is already at 85,000 deaths, because we have no governance to speak of other than division, populism, demagoguery, narcissism in our leadership. But we are, like the 1930s, facing a global crisis with global division. And our institutions are very weak globally. They're funded by the choice of nation states. The United States is choosing not to fund the international system now because the international system is a limit on US unilateralism. And so the US is cutting off its funding of international institutions, even blaming them because they allow China to be a member, for example. So all of this is to say, I think the president is exactly on track when he speaks about the need for the common good, for a new cultural model. I would say the most important cultural model is diversity, that we understand and respect diversity so that no one country or no one ethnicity aims to dominate anybody else, but we understand the common challenge that humanity is facing. This is probably, for me, the most fundamental point. I don't want to attack the United States to have some other group assert international hegemony. That would be ridiculous. It is to have a world in which we can cooperate together to solve our very serious common problems, whether it's controlling a virus or whether it is controlling climate change or whether it is addressing mass pollution or fighting poverty. So all of my work, and I'll just end here and turn it back to you, Mehmet. My work at a technical level argues that these are solvable problems. The public health challenge can be solved through public health approaches. This is very clear. Many countries have contained this epidemic, but it requires intensive public health services of testing, tracing, contacting, quarantining as the method of control. But that works. Similarly, we can fight climate change by moving to renewable energy at large scale. That works. We can fight poverty by enabling all people to have access to basic health, education, job training, and skills. In other words, we have solvable problems where knowledge can be put to solution. Our challenge, therefore, really is a cultural challenge, and it is the challenge that the president emphasized also, putting knowledge to bear in politics. You know, Trump is not only an ignorant man, he is attacking the scientists every day, and for real reason, because he has to attack knowledge in order to stay in power. So it's an active war on knowledge. It's an active war on rationality. It's an active promotion of fear that enables someone of such disordered mentality to stay in power. And this is where I think the president's words are extremely pertinent, that we need to bring knowledge to bear through also a moral perspective, because it's knowledge for the public good, not knowledge for greed, not knowledge for power. And in that sense, it really is what the president said. It's a cultural challenge that we face more than anything. You know, the good news is that vast majority of people in the world want that, of course. They don't want these crazy leaders determining their fate. Even in the United States, where Trump has a cult following, it is a minority, definitely. Most of the country can't stand this man, but he has a minority that is strong enough to sustain power for the short term. The similar situation in Brazil with a very similar character, Bolsonaro, who has plummeting approval ratings and is endangering his country. So our need is to find a political framework that is cooperative, evidence and science-based, and does not aim for and protects knowledge from the abuses of power and greed. Well, it's a big challenge, and it's a very deep crisis right now, and it's getting deeper because it's not being managed by the powerful properly. And all I can emphasize for your own countries is public health, public health, public health. Stop the epidemic, stay safe, and then there will be a future. And do not listen to Mr. Trump. He will wreck the world if he's given the opportunity.